Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. Toward the end of last year, unfortunately, Eddie Van Halen was taken from us, passed away. And so since then, in tribute to him and also in my desire to gain a better understanding of these albums, I've been looking at David Lee Roth's era of Van Halen, looking at those albums. So I'm now 5 posts in, which puts us at Diver Down. Now, Diver Down is, some people might say this is kind of a divisive album in Van Halen's catalog. And I'm not sure that I would say it's really their greatest album and it's not their poorest album, but I certainly think it's probably their most problematic. Getting into Diver Down, you got to keep in mind that Van Halen had been in a cycle of touring and recording nonstop since their first album for the most part. They would go out on tour for 9 months out of the year, come in, record a new album, and then immediately go back on tour. So they were pretty frazzled. You know, we're talking about 5 years worth in 1982, whenever they were getting into making this album. And they really kind of were trying to take some downtime. Eddie Van Halen really wanted to kind of slow down. You know, the previous album, Fair Warning, although being a very artistically successful album, was their slowest selling album. So there was some pressure there. And I think that Eddie felt it a little bit too, because he really tried to take control on that album. And due to its slow sales, I think that Eddie Van Halen kind of had a slight loss of confidence in where he wanted to go with the band and what he was doing. So he kind of wanted to sit down and take a breather. But David Lee Roth had this idea, well, rather than just take a full-on breather, let's just record a single and put it out there to let everybody know that we're still around, and then we'll take a breather and we'll reconvene and make an album. So there were some discussions about this, and what they ended up doing was doing a cover song. Now, they hadn't actually done a cover song in quite a while. They did that in their first couple albums, but they downplayed it a little bit in their more recent work. And there was a little bit of fidgeting about it, but they finally decided on doing Oh Pretty Woman, the Roy Orbison song. And this actually, to me, was the hook for this album, oddly. Although I'd gotten in Van Halen through 1984 and had gotten Van Halen 1, I was also playing in a rock band in high school, and we decided to play Pretty Woman. And as far as I was concerned, Van Halen was the band that had done that song. I mean, they knew this guy Roy Orbison had done it, but I got this album specifically to study the Oh Pretty Woman version that Van Halen had done. And I was kind of not the only one. That song was a huge hit for Van Halen. They even recorded a video for it that was banned from MTV.
Pretty woman, won't you pardon me? Pretty woman, I couldn't help but see. Pretty woman, oh, you look lovely as you can be. Are you lonely just like me?
The song overall was a big sell for them and kind of ended up bringing more attention to them than they had planned. So the record company really started leaning on them, and they were pushing them like, where's the album? Where's the album? You have the single, it's going off real well, where's the album? So they went back into the studio and they cranked out Diver Down in the course of like a few weeks and at a very relatively low cost. The covers on this album are a feature that you can't ignore about it. When Van Halen had done covers in the past, they were extremely adept at taking a song and remaking it so it sounded like something that they would have done. It makes sense for them. But they kind of ran into some troubles on this one, because I think that David Lee Roth was really pushing hard to push the commercial side of the band forward again. You know, after Fair Warning had not fared super well as far as sales go, he was trying to push them to do songs people that were already familiar with. If you have a song that's already popular, that's already a hit, and you can remake it, then theoretically you should already kind of have one leg up. But some of the choices of these covers, I think, are a little bit ill-advised. And in the end, they end up kind of coming off a little bit dorky. So, like, for example, Oh Pretty Woman, it's a good cover. It makes sense for Van Halen to a degree to make it, because of the guitar part is something that Eddie Van Halen could key into. But they also had Dancing in the Streets. And Dancing in the Streets is an old Motown song. And there's no riff in that song. It was really difficult for Eddie to come up with something that fit his style of playing in that song. And so they came up with this kind of keyboard part that was actually supposed to be a part of another song. It's still this like weird Pac-Man delayed Moog background thing, and it sort of worked for the most part.
Chicago, they'll be dancing.
Now, another kind of category of songs on Van Halen's Diver Down are the instrumentals. And, Eddie Van Halen always had instrumental tracks, but there's, in this case, usually his instrumental tracks are just kind of meant as vignettes, little small things. They're not super, structured or well thought out. It's usually just him doing some cool guitar stuff on and just recording it, rolling tape. And on Diver Down, unusually, there's 3 instrumental tracks. Now, 2 of those instrumental tracks are kind of meant as introductions to other songs. There's a song called Intruder. That song is kind of this real dark, noisy instrumental that leads right into Pretty Woman. It's just kind of meant to lengthen the track a little bit. And then there's Little Guitars, the intro, which I'm going to come back to in a second. That's its own thing. But the one that's really kind of a guitar feature on its own, a standalone guitar feature, is the song Cathedral. And it's another example of Eddie's real kind of his genius with coming up with stuff. Eddie Van Halen saw a connection between the sound he was getting on this and sort of like a church organ. But it's just him and a delay pedal and his volume knob. It's nothing fancy. It's just another great example of how Eddie's explorations and his own kind of musical creativity led him down interesting paths and usually very musically satisfying ones overall. Now, a third category of songs on Diver Down are the actual full original Van Halen songs that are on this album. I know that you can count their instrumental songs as originals as well, but they're not really fleshed out songs, pieces of music. They're kind of vignettes, introductions overall. And there's 4 really, really great original tunes on Diver Down that I think up to this point, again, are some of the greatest things that Van Halen had done to that point. Hang 'Em High, Secrets, and Secrets has a very unique kind of shuffly vibe on it that you don't hear anywhere else in the Van Halen catalog up to that point. And the Full Bug, which is kind of a remake of an old demo that they had. But the one that I really want to focus on is the tune Little Guitars. I think that this particular tune is one of the most sophisticated things that Eddie Van Halen had written up to this point. I talked a little bit about Unchained in the last one and about how it's a perfectly crafted pop song and about how he was really trying to find ways to nudge pop songwriting in certain directions. And I think that Little Guitars is another step in his exploration of what you can get away with in a 3-minute pop song. Even within the main form of the song, it's clearly got a verse, chorus, verse format, but the way he plays with it and the variations, if you try to actually map out this song, it very rarely actually repeats itself in the same way anywhere throughout the piece. There's a part where there's a guitar riff with vocal, then later on a guitar riff without a vocal. And there's a guitar riff where it's by itself and then no guitar riff, the same guitar riff later with drums, or just mixing up the components of the song in novel ways so that the song never really does repeat itself, but exactly. But it has a great sense of continuity. It never really breaks that form. But what I think is really fascinating about Little Guitars is it has this feature in it that we've seen some up to this point, but it really comes to fruition a lot more later on in Van Halen's catalog. And it's the introduction to this song. Now, of course, you're talking about the Little Guitars intro. That's its own standalone track, and it leads right into Little Guitars. And I think it's a valid part of the song, even though it's tracked separately. But what's really interesting to me about the beginning of this song is it's this sort of instrumental journey that Eddie Van Halen does just before he gets into the song. The opening riff of the song doesn't really sound anything like the body of the song. But he goes through in the minute or so that he has this introduction of the song, he goes through about 5 or 6 or 7 different ideas, one thing after the other. And it's very through composed. It has a sense of direction, but it's almost like a miniature overture for the song. It predicts a lot of the things that are going to happen in the actual body of Little Guitars. It has these big boisterous riffs in it with big suspended chords in it, but then the body of the song, also the main song, has a lot of suspended chords in it in the main riffs of the tune. And it's almost like later on in the 80s, Rush would take all of their instrumental prowess and they would funnel them down to these, what I would call instrumental excursions. You know, it's like guitar solo, but it's a whole different journey in and of itself. Eddie Van Halen was exploring instrumental excursions himself, I think, but he was putting them as introductions to songs and not really doing instrumental excursion work within a song as much. Within the song, you'd have a more open guitar solo that followed generally the chords and the form of the song. But his introductions became their own pieces to an extent. And you see that really clearly on little guitars. So again, we see this interesting divide in Van Halen where you've got this desire to please the audience and Eddie's desire to explore and find new limits to his voice within the format that he's chosen. He's not trying to go out and make a jazz standards album. That's not what I'm saying. But he's really exploring what's possible within his sort of power, hard rock, pop format. And pushing the edges of it. This is part of Eddie Van Halen's true genius, too. I mean, yes, he was an amazing guitar player. Yes, he did things on electric guitar that had never been done before and changed the way people interfaced with the instrument from then on out. But certainly at this point, we're starting to see how he's trying to find new ways of writing within a song format, you know? He was always very good about being musical with songs. He knew how to use chords. He knew how to use dynamics, which is like rare, to be honest. He knew how to quiet things down and bring them back up most effectively. But really at this point, he's starting to look at compositional considerations in his songs. And certainly moving forward, I think that would be something that would come up a lot in the future. So you see Eddie's genius, you know, taking root and rhizomatically spreading out underneath the structures of Van Halen's pop music. And that happened on Diver Down. So whenever I first decided to come back to listen to Diver Down, I haven't listened to it in a very, very long time. I was quite ready to bash it, to be honest. Because the presence of the covers on the album is so... I mean, they're eyeball rolling sometimes, especially when you don't have to flip the album. When you put Pretty Woman and Dancing with the Streets right by each other in a track list and there's no side A, side B, like, you know, if you have it on a CD, then it really starts to feel like it's overkill on the covers. But ultimately, Diver Down is actually a really fun album to listen to, even if you take into account all of the covers in it. And it's a little bit disappointing as a follow-up, in my opinion, to Fair Warning, because Fair Warning really saw the band going a little bit different direction. But Diver Down, despite being a little bit lighter album overall, still has amazing musicianship on it. And even though, you know, it's a bit problematic, it still is not a hard thing to listen to. And I have to say, though, if you listen to Diver Down and you're one of the folks that says, well, you know, Van Halen sold out whenever Sammy Hagar came on, or Van Halen sold out on 1984, I don't think any of that's true. I think if you're going to point to any place where Van Halen kind of sold out, it's on Diver Down. And I may get some heat for saying that out loud, but they were trying really hard to please their audience with all of these cover songs on there. And their record company. I shouldn't say that entirely because the record company pressure on them to get the album out was probably pretty great. And they're pretty frazzled from being on the road for 5 years in a row. So just getting up there and knocking out five fun cover songs was probably a bit of a refreshing reprieve for them. But looking back on it, of course, Eddie Van Halen had some problems with the album in the end. He didn't really like having the popularity of the covers over his own music. And this particular tension on this album would be the kind of straw that broke the camel's back as far as Eddie's desire to have control over the group. And moving forward after this album, 1984, the genius that is 1984 as an album, is a reaction to what happened on Diver Down. So that's where we're headed next. Okay, in 1984, the big one is next. So if you want to know when that's going to happen, please like and subscribe and share this video out with your friends if you have the opportunity. Of course, I'll be putting a Van Halen track from Diver Down up on Spotify, probably little guitars because I love that song. And that's all I got for you guys this week. So until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.